The rescue team had been searching for 3 days through the worst blizzard to hit Wyoming's Bighorn Mountains in decades. Hope was fading as quickly as the daylight on that bitter January evening when they spotted it, a faint wisp of smoke rising above the snow-laden pines. What they found inside the half-collapsed cabin would haunt them for years. 3 frozen bodies and 1 woman, barely alive, clutching an antique Winchester rifle in one hand and a weathered leather map in the other. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. As consciousness flickered in her eyes, she whispered 5 words that would spark a mystery spanning 3 generations. Don't let them find it. Abigail "Abby" Blackwood had never planned to return to Clearwater County. 27 years had passed since she'd left the small mining community, nestled in the shadow of Wyoming's Bighorn Range, swearing never to look back. But fate has a peculiar way of breaking promises. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Abby was preparing for a client meeting at the architectural firm in Boston, where she'd built her career, meticulously arranging blueprints, when her cell phone vibrated across her desk. "Miss Blackwood," a deep voice, unfamiliar. "This is Sheriff Mason Holbrook from Clearwater County, Wyoming," her coffee mug stilled halfway to her lips. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Your brother, Ethan Blackwood, passed away last night." The mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the polished concrete floor. Coffee splashed across her ivory pantsuit, but she barely noticed. Ethan, her little brother with the gap-toothed smile and endless questions, who'd once followed her everywhere like a shadow. The brother she hadn't spoken to in nearly 3 decades. "How?" The word emerged as a whisper. "Heart attack, ma'am. Found him in his workshop this morning when he didn't show up to open the hardware store." Abby sank into her chair, memories washing over her like a tide. Ethan had taken over their father's hardware store, just as everyone expected. He'd stayed in Clearwater while she'd fled to the East Coast, determined to escape the weight of family expectations and the cloud of tragedy that had followed the Blackwoods for generations. "There's something else, Ms. Blackwood." The sheriff cleared his throat. "In your brother's will, you're named as guardian for his daughter, Sophia." "Daughter?" Abby's voice rose. "Ethan had a child." "Yes, ma'am. Sophia's 17. Her mother passed away several years ago. A niece, a 17-year-old niece she'd never met, never known existed." The magnitude of what the sheriff was saying began to sink in. Ethan had built a life without her, married, had a child, while she'd been determinedly forgetting everything about her past. "There's no one else," the sheriff added, his voice gentle but firm. "I understand this is unexpected, but Sophia has no other family. She's a good kid, just struggling with the loss." 3 days later, Abby stepped off a small commuter plane at the regional airport in Sheridan, Wyoming. January winds whipped around her as she walked across the tarmac, carrying more force than she remembered, slicing through her designer wool coat like it was tissue paper. The mountains loomed in the distance, their jagged peaks disappearing into heavy clouds that promised snow. A tall man in a sheriff's uniform waited by a patrol SUV, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. He extended a gloved hand as she approached. "Sheriff Holbrook, we spoke on the phone. Sorry about the weather. Storms rolling in faster than predicted." He had the weathered face of someone who spent most of his life outdoors, deep creases around eyes that missed nothing. As he loaded her suitcase into the back of the patrol vehicle, Abby noticed how he scanned the horizon, his expression concerned. "We should get moving. They're talking about closing the mountain pass in a few hours." The drive to Clearwater took them along winding roads that grew increasingly narrow and treacherous as they climbed into the mountains. Abby watched the familiar yet foreign landscape pass by, feeling like a stranger in her own story. "How is she, Sophia?" Abby finally asked, breaking the silence. Sheriff Holbrook's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Tough kid, quiet. She and Ethan were close, just the two of them since her mom passed. She's staying with my wife and me for now. I didn't know Ethan got married, Abby said, the words tasting bitter, to Rebecca Mitchell, local girl. They were high school sweethearts, married right after graduation. She died of cancer when Sophia was 12. Abby stared out the window, watching snowflakes begin to fall, first just a few, then more insistently. Rebecca Mitchell. She remembered her. A quiet girl with a gentle smile who'd been a grade behind them in school. Your brother was well respected in town, the sheriff continued. Ran the hardware store, served on the town council. The funeral's tomorrow, weather permitting. The snow was falling harder now, visibility deteriorating by the minute. Sheriff. Holbrook leaned forward, squinting through the windshield as he slowed the vehicle. Never seen it come in this fast, he muttered, flipping on emergency lights. We might need to stop at the old Murray place if this keeps up. It's just ahead. Before Abby could respond, a dark shape darted across the road. The sheriff swerved. The SUV's tires, losing traction on the rapidly accumulating snow. They slid sideways, the world spinning in a blur of white, until they came to rest against a snowbank. You okay? Sheriff Holbrook asked, already reaching for his radio. Abby nodded, her heart pounding. Outside, the snow was now a solid white curtain, obscuring everything beyond a few feet. Dispatch, this is Holbrook. We're stranded on Route 16, about 8 miles from town. Storms hit full force. Send Tucker with the snowcat when it's safe. He paused, listening to the crackled response. Copy that. We'll shelter at the Murray cabin. Over. He turned to Abby, his expression grim. Power's out across the county. Roads are closing. We're going to have to wait this out. The Murray place? Abby asked, a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature running down her spine. Old hunting cabin about a quarter-mile from here. Still maintained by the Forest Service. It's our best option right now. 20 minutes later, they trudged through knee-deep snow, the wind howling around them as they finally reached the small log cabin. It was little more than a one-room shelter with a stone fireplace, but it represented salvation against the worsening blizzard. Sheriff Holbrook quickly got a fire going while Abby stood shivering by the door, trying to process how quickly her world had shifted. Just days ago, she'd been preparing for a major presentation. Now, she was stranded in a blizzard in the mountains she'd spent a lifetime trying to escape. We should be okay here until the storm breaks, the sheriff said, feeding another log to the growing flames. There's emergency supplies in that trunk, food, water, blankets. Abby helped unpack the provisions, grateful for the task to occupy her hands and mind. As she opened the wooden trunk, something caught her eye. Carved into the underside of the lid was a symbol, a triangle with a series of lines radiating from one corner like a crude compass rose. "Sheriff!" she called, her voice strangely tight. "What do you know about this cabin?" He glanced over. "Built in the 1890s during the mining boom, used by hunters for decades. Why?" Abby traced the carving with her fingertip. "This symbol, I've seen it before. Probably an old trail marker. Lots of prospectors had their own systems for marking claims, but Abby wasn't listening. She was remembering the last time she'd seen that symbol, on a piece of yellowed paper in her father's study, the night before he died. The night before, everything changed. "Sheriff, what do you know about the Blackwood family history?" she asked. Suddenly Mason Holbrook paused, studying her with renewed interest. "Not much more than anyone else in town, I suppose. Old mining family. Your great-grandfather struck it rich, then supposedly lost everything in bad investments. That's the official story," Abby said quietly. The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "You're saying there's an unofficial version?" Outside, the wind howled, rattling the cabin's windows. Abby wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and settled closer to the fire. "My father was obsessed with family history. He collected every scrap of information about my great-grandfather, Harrison Blackwood. The story passed down wasn't about bad investments. It was about hidden treasure. Treasure? The sheriff's tone was skeptical. Gold. Harrison supposedly hid his fortune somewhere in these mountains before he died. My father spent his life searching for it. Abby stared into the flames. It destroyed him, destroyed our family. Sheriff Holbrook was silent for a long moment. Your brother never mentioned any of this. Ethan was practical. He thought it was nonsense. Abby's throat tightened. We fought about it the night I left town. He said I was running away from responsibility, from my family. I told him he was throwing his life away chasing ghosts. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd fled the family legacy, while Ethan had embraced their roots in Clearwater. Yet here she was, drawn back after all these years. Did your father ever find anything? Any proof? The sheriff asked. Not that I know of. Just fragments, old letters, mining records. Abby hesitated. And a map, at least part of one. I saw it once when I was a teenager. It had that same symbol. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sheriff Holbrook's radio crackled to life, making them both jump. Through static, a voice reported that the storm had closed all roads into the mountains. No one would be reaching them until morning at the earliest. Copy that, the sheriff responded. We're secure at the Murray cabin. How's the town? Emergency shelters set up at the high school. Power's out everywhere. Oh, and Sheriff, that Blackwood girl, Sophia, she's gone missing. Abby's head snapped. Up as the sheriff demanded, What do you mean, missing? Mrs. Holbrook says she went to check on her after dinner and her room was empty. Window open, took some supplies, left a note saying not to worry, that she needed to get something from her dad's place. Sheriff Holbrook swore under his breath. That's 5 miles outside of town. In this weather, she'll never make it. We've got volunteers forming search parties, but with the roads, keep me updated. If the storm breaks enough for Tucker to get through with the snowcat, getting to the Blackwood property is priority 1. He signed off and turned to Abby, his expression grave. I'm sorry. We have to find her, Abby said, already on her feet. She's out there because of me. Because of you. How do you figure that? I'm her guardian now. She probably panicked, wanted to get something personal before... Abby stopped short, a terrible thought forming. Sheriff, did Ethan live in the old family house, the one on Crooked Pine Road? He nodded slowly. Same house your father had. Ethan renovated it over the years, but... My father's study. Did Ethan keep it? The bookshelves, the old desk? Far? As I know, he turned it into his own workshop, kept a lot of the original furniture. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. What are you thinking? Abby paced the small cabin. What if Ethan wasn't as practical as I thought? What if he found something in that house, something related to Harrison's gold? She turned to face the sheriff. And what if Sophia knows about... It outside, the blizzard raged unabated, a white fury obscuring everything. Somewhere in that maelstrom was a 17-year-old girl Abby had never met, but was bound to by blood, possibly risking her life for a family legacy Abby had spent decades running from. We need to reach that house, Abby insisted. Sheriff Holbrook shook his head. No one's going anywhere in this storm. It's suicide. Then we need to try contacting her. Does she have a cell phone? No service in this weather, and the landlines are down with the power. Abby felt helpless, trapped in the small cabin, while her niece was somewhere in the blizzard. She returned to the trunk of supplies, rummaging through it as if it might contain a solution. Her hand brushed against something hard at the bottom, a metal box. She pulled it out, examining the rusted container. What's this? Sheriff Holbrook glanced over. Old emergency radio, probably hasn't worked in years. Abby opened the box, revealing an ancient ham radio setup. Her father had been an amateur radio enthusiast. She'd watched him repair equipment like this countless times. Maybe we can get it working, she said, already examining the wiring. If Sophia made it to the house, there's an old radio in the basement. My father never got rid of anything. The sheriff looked doubtful, but joined her in assessing the equipment. You know how to fix this? I watch my father often enough. Abby's hands moved with surprising confidence, reconnecting wires and checking components. My brother and I used to communicate with these when we were kids, had our own frequencies. For the next hour, Abby worked on the radio, while Sheriff Holbrook maintained the fire and periodically checked outside. The storm showed no signs of abating, the wind screaming around the cabin's eaves like a living thing. Finally, the radio crackled with static. Abby adjusted dials, her heart racing. Hello? Is anyone receiving? This is Abby Blackwood broadcasting from the Murray cabin. Nothing but static answered her. She tried again, working through different frequencies, including the one she and Ethan had used as children. Still nothing. Keep trying, Sheriff Holbrook encouraged, his own concern evident. If she made it to the house... The radio suddenly emitted a burst of static, followed by a faint voice. Is anyone there? Hello? Abby nearly dropped the microphone. Hello, this is Abby Blackwood. Who am I speaking with? More static then. This is Sophia. Sophia Blackwood. Are you really my Aunt Abby? Relief flooded through Abby. Yes, I'm your aunt. I'm with Sheriff. Holbrook, where are you? Are you safe? I'm at Dad's house. Our house, I guess. The girl's voice faded in and out through the static. I had to get here before they did. Abby and the sheriff exchanged glances. Before who did, Sophia? Abby asked carefully. The men who've been watching the house since Dad died. Static interrupted before Sophia's voice returned. Found something in Dad's workshop yesterday. A letter from our great-grandfather and part of a map. Dad had been piecing it together for years. Sheriff Holbrook leaned closer to the microphone. Sophia, this is Sheriff Holbrook. Are you saying someone's been watching your father's house? Black SUV parked down the road. 2 men. They came to the funeral home today asking questions about Dad's belongings. Static overtook her voice again. Broke in last night, but the storm scared them off. Abby felt a chill that had nothing to do with the blizzard. Sophia, listen to me. Board up the doors and windows. Don't let anyone in until we get there. I'm in Grandpa's basement workshop, Sophia replied, her voice steadier now. Dad showed me the hidden room years ago, said it was a family secret. Hidden room? Abby repeated, stunned. In all her years growing up in that house, she'd never known about a hidden room. Behind the bookcase in the workshop. Dad said Great-Grandpa Harrison built it to hide his research. More static then. Found the rifle and the map. Dad said, if anything happened to him, I should bring them to you. The connection deteriorated, Sophia's voice becoming a fragmented whisper through increasing static. And coming for the map, then nothing but the hollow hiss of dead air. Sophia, Abby called into the microphone. Sophia, can you hear me? Sheriff Holbrook was already at the window, peering through a gap in the shutters. Storm's starting to let up a bit. First light, we make it for your brother's house. Abby stared at the silent radio, her mind racing. The symbol in the cabin, the map Sophia mentioned, strangers watching Ethan's house. It was like stepping back in time, back into the obsession that had consumed her father. My father always said, fortune wasn't just gold, Abby said quietly. He believed Harrison found something else in the mines, something more valuable, something people would kill for. Sheriff Holbrook turned to her, his expression guarded. What kind of something? I don't know. My father never said exactly. But the night before he died, I overheard him arguing with someone on the phone. He said he'd finally found proof that he knew where Harrison had hidden the key. The key? To what? Abby shook her head. I never found out. The next morning he was gone. Hiking accident, they said. His body was found at the bottom of Carter's Ridge. The sheriff was silent, processing this information. Finally he asked, You don't believe it was an accident? I didn't know what to believe. I was 18, angry, scared. All I knew was that I needed to get away from this place, from the shadow of Harrison Blackwood and his lost fortune. Abby stared into the fire, but Ethan stayed, and apparently he kept looking as the first pale light of dawn filtered through the cabin windows. The blizzard had moderated from a howling monster to a steady snowfall. Sheriff Holbrook received word that emergency crews had cleared the main road into town, and a snowcat was on its way to their location. Abby packed their supplies with mechanical efficiency, her mind focused on the girl she'd never met. A girl who was alone in a house that had once been her home, possibly in danger because of a family legacy. Abby had spent her adult life denying. "We'll find her," Sheriff Holbrook assured her, reading her worry. "Sophia's smart. If she's hiding in this secret room, she'll be okay until we get there." Abby nodded, but a sense of dread had settled in her stomach. As the rumble of the approaching snowcat vibrated through the cabin walls, she couldn't shake the feeling that history was repeating itself. 3 generations of Blackwoods had been shaped and destroyed by Harrison's secret. Now, it seemed, it was Sophia's turn. And Abby's. The snowcat arrived. Piloted by a burly man the sheriff greeted as Tucker. As they loaded their gear, Abby took one last look at the cabin, at the symbol carved into the trunk. She'd spent 27 years running from her past, but somehow it had found her anyway. As they climbed into the snowcat, Sheriff Holbrook touched her arm. "Your family's had its share of tragedy, Miss Blackwood, but maybe you're back for a reason. Maybe it's time to break the cycle." The massive treads of the snowcat churned through the deep snow as they began their journey toward town, toward Ethan's house, toward Sophia, toward the truth about Harrison Blackwood's hidden fortune and the mysterious key that had cost her father his life. What Abby couldn't know as they created the ridge overlooking the valley below was that in less than 24 hours, she would be standing in a century-old mine shaft, facing the same choice her great-grandfather had faced: protect the secret at all costs, or let the truth finally come to light. And like Harrison before her, the decision would change everything. The snowcat lumbered through the winter landscape, its massive treads churning through snowdrifts that would have stopped any conventional vehicle. Inside, Abby pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching familiar landmarks emerge from the white haze. The journey into town would normally take 20 minutes by car. In these conditions, Sheriff Holbrook estimated an hour. "Tell me about Sophia," Abby said, breaking the tense silence. Tucker, the snowcat operator, glanced in the rearview mirror. A heavy-set man with a salt-and-pepper beard, he had the look of someone who'd spent a lifetime in these mountains. "Bright. Gid," he offered. "Runs the school newspaper. Got accepted to Northwestern on scholarship. She and my daughter Jess played softball together until last year." "What happened last year?" Abby asked. Tucker exchanged a look with Sheriff Holbrook. "She changed. Got real intense about her studies. Started spending all her free time with Ethan in that workshop of his." Abby digested this information. "What exactly did my brother do in this workshop?" "Furniture restoration mostly," Sheriff Holbrook said. "Had a knack for breathing life into old pieces, but lately—" He trailed off, frowning. "Lately what?" "Lately. He'd been doing a lot of research. Town records, mining claims. Judge Preston mentioned Ethan had been requesting access to old property deeds from the 1890s. The snowcat crested a hill, and suddenly the valley opened before them. Clearwater lay nestled among the pines, smoke rising from chimneys into the steel-grey sky. The storm had passed over, leaving behind a transformed world of pristine white. "We'll drop you at the station first," Sheriff Holbrook told Tucker. "Then head straight to the Blackwood place." Tucker shook his head. "Storm took out the bridge on Cedar Creek Road. Only way to reach that side of town now is the old logging trail past Wilkinson's property." "That'll add another 40 minutes, the sheriff muttered. Abby's anxiety spiked. "What about those men Sophia mentioned?" The ones watching the house. I've got Deputy Reeves checking every access road into town, Sheriff Holbrook assured her. If anyone's trying to reach your brother's place, we'll know. As they descended toward Clearwater, Abby felt a disconcerting sense of homecoming. The town hadn't changed much. The same storefronts lined Main Street, though many were boarded up now, casualties of time and economic decline. They passed the hardware store, Blackwood's Hardware, the sign still proudly proclaimed, and Abby thought of Ethan, carrying on their father's business while she built skyscrapers 2,000 miles away. The sheriff's radio crackled continuously, with reports of downed power lines, stranded motorists, and property damage from the blizzard. The entire county was in emergency mode, which made Abby wonder how many resources could realistically be spared to search for potential intruders at one isolated house. "Drop us at the station," Sheriff Holbrook instructed Tucker as they reached the town center. "Get yourself home to check on Karen and the kids, then help the road crew if you can." Inside the station, a harried deputy was coordinating emergency responses. He looked up as they entered, relief evident in his expression. "Sheriff, thank God. The situation's getting dicey at the shelter. We've got over 60 people crammed into the high school gym and the backup generator's running low on fuel." He handed over a clipboard. "And there's still no communication with the east side of the county." Sheriff Holbrook scanned the report, his frown deepening. "What about those suspicious vehicles I asked you to watch for? Any black SUVs entered town?" Nothing was coming in, but early this morning, before the bridge went out, Hank Wilson reported seeing a vehicle matching that description heading out toward the old mining road. Thought it was odd, given the weather. Abby and the sheriff exchanged alarmed glances. "The mining road?" Abby asked. "The one that leads up to the Harrison Blackwood claim?" The deputy nodded. "That's the one. Goes nowhere else these days. Road's been closed for years, though. Would have thought it'd be completely impassable after this storm." Sheriff Holbrook was already moving toward the door. "Get on the radio to the search teams. Tell them to converge on the Blackwood property. We need to find Sophia now." 15 minutes later, they were in the sheriff's personal four-wheel drive truck, chains on the tires, fighting their way through unplowed streets toward the outskirts of town. The old logging trail Tucker had mentioned was little more than a winding path through dense forest, barely wide enough for the truck. Branches heavy with snow scraped against the windows as they inched along. "The Harrison Blackwood claim," Abby said, breaking the silence. "What do you know about it?" Sheriff Holbrook kept his eyes on the treacherous path. "Not much. Abandoned over a century ago. Local legend says it was the richest gold strike in the county before it mysteriously dried up." "My father believed otherwise," Abby said. "He thought Harrison found something so valuable that he faked the mine's decline, then secretly extracted the ore himself. Gold fever makes people believe all kinds of things. It wasn't just gold he was after." Abby hesitated, then decided to trust the sheriff with the full story. "According to my father's research, Harrison was looking for something specific, something mentioned in an old Arapaho legend about a cave of blue fire." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "Blue fire?" The native peoples avoided a particular area in these mountains. Said it housed spirits that burned with cold blue flames. When miners started exploring the region, several disappeared. Harrison was convinced they'd stumbled upon something extraordinary. "Like what?" Abby shook her head. "That's what my father spent his life trying to figure out. He collected old journals, letters, geological surveys. He corresponded with experts around the world. Whatever he thought Harrison found, it consumed him." The truck lurched as they navigated a particularly steep section of trail. Through the falling snow, Abby caught glimpses of the valley below. They were circling around the northern edge of Clearwater, approaching the ridge where the Blackwood property stood. "There!" Sheriff Holbrook pointed through the windshield. "That's your brother's place." The two-story Victorian came into view, perched on a bluff overlooking the town. Snow blanketed the gabled roof and wrap-around porch, smoke rising from the chimney, a sign that someone was indeed inside. The sight of her childhood home sent a wave of memories washing over Abby. Summer evenings on that porch, her mother's garden now buried under snow, the tire swing Ethan had loved, long gone from the ancient oak tree. As they drew closer, Sheriff Holbrook slowed the truck, scanning the surroundings. No sign of any other vehicles. They parked behind the house and approached cautiously, the sheriff with his hand resting on his holstered weapon. The back door stood partially open, snow drifting across the threshold. "Sophia?" Sheriff Holbrook called out. "It's Sheriff Holbrook. With your Aunt Abby? Are you here?" Silence answered them. They entered the mudroom, where boots and coats suggested recent use. The kitchen beyond was neat, but showed signs of hurried departure. A half-empty mug of coffee on the table. Bread, left out beside an open jar of peanut butter. Abby moved through the house in a daze, noting the changes Ethan had made over the years, alongside the familiar elements he'd preserved. The dining room still displayed their mother's china cabinet. The living room featured the same stone fireplace, though Ethan had added built-in bookshelves on either side, filled with volumes on local history, geology, and woodworking. The workshop, it would be in the basement? Sheriff Holbrook asked. Abby nodded. The stairs are off the kitchen. The basement had once been their father's domain, a cavernous space divided into smaller rooms. One had housed his radio equipment, another his extensive library, and the largest had been his workshop. As they descended the creaking wooden steps, Abby felt 16 again, sneaking down to eavesdrop on her father's late-night conversations with fellow treasure-seekers. The basement had been transformed. Ethan's woodworking tools hung in neat rows along one wall. A large workbench dominated the center of the room, covered with sandpaper, stains, and varnish. But it was the far wall that drew Abby's attention, a massive bookcase filled with what appeared to be their father's old research materials. "Sophia," Sheriff Holbrook called again, "it's safe to come out now." Only the hum of the furnace answered them. Abby approached the bookcase, examining the volumes. Many were familiar, geological surveys, history books, mining journals, but others were new additions, academic papers on crystallography, articles on rare earth minerals, and several books on quantum physics that seemed wildly out of place. "What was Ethan into?" she murmured. Sheriff Holbrook was examining the workbench. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a notebook open to a page filled with Ethan's distinctive handwriting. Next to it lay a topographical map of the mountains west of town, with several locations circled in red. One, labeled Harrison's Folly, was marked with the same triangle symbol Abby had seen in the Murray cabin. "He was getting close," Abby whispered. "Just like Dad." The sheriff picked up the notebook, scanning the contents. "These are coordinates, and dates going back 5 years. He looked up at Abby. "Your brother was methodically searching the mountains." A noise from behind the bookcase, so faint they might have imagined it, made them both freeze. "Sophia?" Abby called softly. Sheriff Holbrook gestured for her to step back, then approached the bookcase, examining it closely. "There's a seam here," he said, running his fingers along the edge. "Not visible unless you're looking for it." Abby joined him, memories stirring. "My father had a hidden compartment in his study where he kept his most important research. Ethan must have discovered it and expanded it. Together, they searched for a mechanism to open the concealed door. It was Abby who found it, a copy of The Geology of Wyoming that, when tilted, triggered a soft click. The entire right side of the bookcase swung inward, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Sheriff Holbrook drew his weapon. "Stay behind me." The passage led to a room Abby had never seen before, a small chamber carved from the very bedrock beneath the house. A single bulb illuminated walls covered with maps, photographs, and handwritten notes. A desk stood against one wall, a computer, still running on a backup battery, but the room was empty. "She was here," Sheriff Holbrook said, pointing to a backpack on the floor, its contents partially spilled out. Energy bars, a water bottle, a flashlight. "Where could she have gone?" Abby asked, panic rising. The sheriff was examining the desk. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the computer screen. A document was open titled Harrison's Legacy. Abby leaned in to read. "Dad, if you're reading this, I've gone to check your latest theory. The storm's given me cover. The men watching the house won't expect anyone to venture out in this weather. I've taken Grandpa's rifle for protection and the map fragment you decoded. I think I've figured out what the symbols mean." Harrison wasn't just hiding gold. He was hiding the entrance to the Blue Cave. "We'll contact when safe." "Sophia, this was meant for Ethan," Abby said, stunned. "She doesn't know he's dead." Sheriff Holbrook was already on his radio. "All units, this is Holbrook. We have a missing 17-year-old female, potentially heading toward the old Harrison Blackwood mine. She's on foot and armed with a rifle. Approach with caution. There may be hostile parties in the area." Abby barely heard him, her attention captured by a framed photograph on the wall. Ethan and a teenage girl standing in front of a cave entrance, both smiling triumphantly. The girl, Sophia, had Ethan's eyes and their mother's determined chin. Scrawled across the bottom in marker was a date from last summer and the words, "Found Entrance Number 3. She knows where she's going," Abby realized. Ethan was teaching her everything. They were searching together. Sheriff Holbrook finished his radio call and joined her at the wall of research. "According to this, there are 5 potential entrances to whatever they were looking for. Based on those coordinates," he pointed to a map with marked locations. "The closest is about 3 miles from here, up in the hills behind the property." "The old mining road the deputy mentioned," Abby said. "That's where it leads," the sheriff nodded grimly. "And if your suspicious men are heading there too." A distant crack echoed through the basement, a sound Abby recognized instantly as a gunshot. They raced back upstairs and outside, where the late afternoon sun was already sinking toward the mountains. In the stillness following the storm, sound carried far across the snow-covered landscape. A second shot rang out, this time clearly from the ridge above the house. "That's a rifle," Sheriff Holbrook said, heading for his truck. "Hunting caliber." "Harrison's rifle," Abby said, remembering the note. Sophia took it for protection. They sped up the old mining road, the truck bouncing violently over ruts and fallen branches. The path narrowed as they climbed, eventually, becoming impassable even for the 4-wheel drive. "We'll have to continue on foot," the sheriff said, retrieving a shotgun from behind his seat and extra ammunition from the glove compartment. "It's about a mile to the old mine entrance from here." Abby pulled her coat tighter as they set out through snow that reached mid-calf in places. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows through the pines. If they didn't find Sophia before dark, the temperature would plummet to dangerous levels. They followed a ridge that wound steadily upward, occasionally spotting footprints in the snow, some fresh, others partially filled by the storm's final flurries. After 20 minutes of difficult hiking, Sheriff Holbrook raised his hand for silence. Voices carried on the cold air, at least 2 people arguing in the distance. They crept forward, taking cover behind a cluster of boulders at the edge of a small clearing. Beyond it stood the dilapidated entrance to an old mine shaft, its timbers sagging with age and neglect. A black SUV was parked nearby, its engine still running. 2 men stood near the entrance, one holding a rifle similar to the one described in Sophia's note. The other was examining something in his hands, what appeared to be an old leather map. "She has to be inside," the armed man was saying. "The tracks lead straight in." "This map doesn't show the full system," the second man replied, frustration evident. "There could be dozens of connecting tunnels. She could be anywhere by now." Then, "We smoke her out, block the entrance, start a fire." "Are you insane? We need her alive to find the main chamber." Blackwood was clear about that. Only his bloodline can locate the final entrance. Abby and Sheriff Holbrook exchanged alarmed glances. Whoever these men were, they knew about the family legacy, possibly more than Abby herself did. And they needed Sophia for something specific. The sheriff gestured for Abby to stay put, then circled around the boulders to approach from another angle. But as he moved, a loose stone clattered down the slope, alerting the armed man, who whirled and fired a shot in their direction. "Police, drop your weapons!" Sheriff Holbrook shouted, returning fire as Abby ducked behind the boulders. Chaos erupted. The two men split up, one diving behind the SUV, the other retreating toward the mine entrance. Gunfire echoed across the clearing as Sheriff Holbrook and the armed man exchanged shots. Abby, heart-pounding, realized the second man was heading into the mine where Sophia might be trapped. Acting on instinct, she circled behind the boulders and sprinted toward a secondary entrance she'd spotted, a ventilation shaft just up the slope from the main tunnel. The shaft was narrow but navigable, dropping steeply into darkness. Abby used her phone's flashlight to illuminate the way as she half climbed, half slid into the mountain's depths. The sound of gunfire grew muffled, then ceased entirely as she descended further. The air grew colder, damper as she reached the bottom of the shaft and found herself in a narrow tunnel reinforced with ancient timbers. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. She moved cautiously forward, guided by a faint glow that suggested the main tunnel lay ahead. "Sophia," she called softly. "Sophia, are you here? I'm Abby, your aunt." A shuffling sound made her freeze. Then from behind a stack of rotting support beams, a girl emerged, tall and slender, with a familiar, determined set to her jaw. She held an antique rifle with the ease of someone who knew how to use it. "You're really her?" the girl asked warily. "Dad's sister?" Abby nodded, throat tight with emotion. "I am. I came as soon as I heard about your father. I'm so sorry, Sophia." The girl's composure wavered for an instant before she steadied herself. "They killed him. It wasn't a heart attack." "What?" "Dad found something last month. Proof that Great-Grandpa Harrison discovered something valuable in these mountains. Something people have been searching for over a century." She patted her jacket pocket. "I have the map he completed. It shows the way to the main chamber." A shout echoed from the main tunnel, followed by the sound of footsteps. "We need to move," Sophia urged, already heading deeper into the labyrinth. "There's another way out through the lower chambers." Abby followed, questions burning in her mind. "Sophia, who are these men? What do they want?" "They work for Westridge Resources. They've been buying up all the old mining claims in the area. For years, Dad figured out they were looking for the same thing Harrison found." Sophia led them through a narrow passage that opened into a larger chamber, but they didn't know exactly where to look until they started monitoring Dad's research. Their voices echoed in the cavernous space. Ancient mining equipment lay scattered about, preserved by the cool, dry air of the deeper chambers. Sophia moved with surprising confidence through the darkness, following what appeared to be deliberate markings on the walls, the same triangular symbol Abby had seen in the Murray cabin. "Harrison left a trail," Sophia explained, noticing Abby's gaze. "Markers that only someone with the key could follow." "The key?" Sophia stopped at a junction where 3 tunnels branched off in different directions. She pulled a small object, and from her pocket, a metal cylinder about the size of a lipstick case. "This is what they're really after. Dad found it hidden in the stock of Harrison's rifle." She twisted the top of the cylinder, revealing a complex arrangement of interlocking gears and a small glass vial containing what looked like blue sand. "It's not just a map. It's a compass calibrated to something specific in these mountains, something that creates a unique magnetic field." Footsteps and voices grew louder behind them. Sophia quickly selected the leftmost tunnel, urging Abby to follow. "What is it calibrated to find?" Abby asked as they hurried deeper into the mountain. "Dad called it blue fire, but its real name is—" A gunshot echoed through the tunnel, the bullet splintering the wooden support beam inches from Sophia's head. They broke into a run as the armed man from outside appeared at the junction, rifle raised. "Stop, or the next one won't miss," he shouted. Sophia pulled Abby into a side passage barely visible in the gloom. They squeezed through a narrow opening that widened into yet another chamber, this one sloping steeply downward. The sound of rushing water grew louder as they descended. "Underground river," Sophia explained breathlessly. "It's how the miners access the deeper levels." The passage ended abruptly at a subterranean waterway, swift-moving and black in the dim light. A decayed wooden platform extended over the water, and the remains of a pulley system suggested it had once been used to ferry equipment downstream. "We can follow it to the lower exit," Sophia said, stepping carefully onto the platform. "It comes out near Carter's Ridge." The name sent a chill through Abby. Carter's Ridge? Where did my father died? Sophia turned her expression grave. Where they made it look like he died. Grandpa found something just like Dad did. They couldn't let him reveal it. Behind them, the armed man's voice echoed closer. "Nowhere left to run, ladies. Just give us the compass and the map, and you can walk out of here." Sophia raised the rifle, aiming at the narrow entrance to their chamber. "Get on the platform, Aunt Abby. Be ready to move when I say." "I'm not leaving you," Abby insisted. "You have to. Someone needs to finish what Harrison started, what Grandpa died for, what Dad—" Her voice broke. "Someone has to make sure the truth comes out." Before Abby could argue further, the second man appeared in the passageway entrance, weapon raised. Sophia fired a warning shot that sent him ducking for cover. "Go!" she shouted to Abby, pressing the metal cylinder into her hand. "Follow the river to the lower chamber. The map is inside the compass. Just twist the base 3 times counterclockwise." "Sophia, no. Trust me, I know these tunnels better than—" "They do. I'll lead them away from the river passage and circle back." She fired another shot, then shoved Abby toward the platform. "Dad said you were the smart one, the one who got away. Maybe that was always the point. One Blackwood to keep the secret, another to reveal it when the time was right." Abby stood, frozen, torn between familial duty to a niece she'd just met and the weight of a mystery that had claimed 2 generations of Blackwoods already. The platform creaked beneath their feet as another bullet ricocheted off the rock wall nearby. In that moment of decision, neither woman saw the tremor that passed through the ancient timbers supporting the chamber's ceiling, nor heard the ominous crack of wood that had stood for over a century finally giving way. The last thing Abby remembered was Sophia pushing her onto the platform as the world collapsed around them in a deafening roar of stone and timber, the force sending her into the frigid current below. Darkness claimed her as the underground river carried her deeper into the mountain's embrace. The metal compass clutched tightly in her hand, a legacy passed from Harrison to her father to Ethan, and now, finally, to her. Cold. Darkness. The rush of water. These sensations penetrated Abby's consciousness first as she drifted back to awareness. She was submerged to her waist in frigid water, her upper body draped over what felt like a rocky ledge. Every breath sent shards of pain through her ribs. Her fingers still clutched the metal cylinder Sophia had pressed into her hands, a compass. The key to whatever Harrison Blackwood had discovered a century ago. How long had she been unconscious? Minutes? Hours? The absolute darkness made it impossible to tell. Her phone was gone, likely claimed by the underground river that had carried her. Who knew how far from the cave-in? Sophia. The memory of her niece pushing her to safety as the tunnel collapsed hit Abby like a physical blow. She had to get back, had to find her. Summoning her strength, Abby pulled herself fully onto the rocky shelf. Her clothes were soaked, and in the subterranean chill, hypothermia was a real danger. She needed to move, to find a way out or back, to where she'd last seen Sophia. The metal cylinder in her hand was her only resource. Remembering Sophia's instructions, Abby twisted the base 3 times counterclockwise. The device clicked, and suddenly a soft blue glow emanated from the glass vial within, illuminating her surroundings. She sat on a natural stone ledge in a chamber where the underground river had carved out a pool before continuing its journey deeper into the mountain. The walls glittered with mineral deposits that reflected the compass's eerie blue light, and there, inscribed on the far wall, was the familiar triangular symbol. Abby approached the marking, running her fingers over the century-old carving. Harrison had been here. With the compass's blue light as her guide, she noticed other symbols, arrows, numbers, notations in a code she didn't understand. A map within the mountain itself. The compass vibrated slightly in her hand, the blue luminescence pulsing when she aimed it toward a narrow fissure in the rock wall. Following its guidance, Abby squeezed through the opening into a tunnel that sloped gradually upward. The air felt different here, warmer, charged somehow. As she ascended, the compass's vibration intensified. The blue glow grew brighter, casting otherworldly shadows on the tunnel walls. After 20 minutes of careful climbing, the passage widened into another chamber, this one clearly man-made. Old mining equipment lay scattered about, picks, shovels, lanterns, preserved by the dry mountain air. On a rough wooden table sat an oil lamp, matches beside it. With trembling hands, Abby lit the lamp. The yellow flame revealed a workshop of sorts, untouched for decades. Journals and maps covered the table. A bedroll in the corner suggested someone had lived here, at least temporarily. On the wall hung a daguerreotype photograph in a tarnished frame, a stern-faced man with a full beard and familiar eyes. "Harrison Blackwood, you found it!" a voice rasped from the shadows. Abby whirled, nearly dropping the lamp. A figure emerged. From an alcove she hadn't noticed, a man leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch, his face streaked with blood and grime. "Sheriff Holbrook." He limped forward, his uniform torn and dusty. "Followed you into the mine. Got caught in the collapse. Woke up in some kind of drainage tunnel and followed it here." He grimaced in pain as he lowered himself onto a wooden crate. "Leg's broken. Can't go much further." Abby quickly moved to examine his injury. The sheriff's left leg was indeed broken, the bone thankfully not protruding, but clearly misaligned beneath his torn pants. "We need to get you out of here," she said. "Not before we find Sophia." His face was grim. "Those men, they're still in the tunnels. I heard them talking before the collapse. They work for Victor Randall." "Who?" "CEO of Westridge Resources. Mining. Company that's been buying up land all over the county. Your brother was fighting them, trying to block their acquisition of the old claims around Harrison's property." The sheriff winced as he shifted position. "Whatever's down here, they want it badly enough to kill it." Abby's attention returned to the table, to Harrison's journals. She opened the one on top, dated 1894. The handwriting was cramped but legible. April. "Javdin, the incident with Thompson today confirms my suspicions. The blue crystals react to blood, specifically Blackwood blood. The vein grows brighter in my presence, dims when I withdraw. I've extracted enough samples to construct a reliable guidance mechanism, but dare not remove more until I understand the full properties. The company men grow suspicious. I've concealed the main chamber entrance and will relocate my equipment to the secondary site tomorrow." "Crystals," Abby murmured, flipping through more pages. A later entry caught her eye. July. 3. Analysis confirms initial hypothesis. The crystal structure is unlike anything previously documented. Its energy potential exceeds all known fuel sources by orders of magnitude. A single pound could power a city for a year. In the wrong hands, it could also level that city in an instant. I cannot allow the company to acquire this deposit. The secret must remain with those who understand the responsibility it carries, my bloodline alone. "My God," Abby whispered, "that's what this has all been about. Not gold, something much more valuable." "And much more dangerous, apparently," Sheriff Holbrook added. A distant rumble interrupted them, not another cave-in, but the echo of voices. The intruders were still searching, possibly closing in on their location. "We need to move," Abby urged, gathering the most important-looking journals and maps. "Can you walk at all?" The sheriff shook his head. "Not without help, but you need to find Sophia. I'll hold them off if they find this chamber." "I'm not leaving you here." "You have to." He pulled his service weapon from its holster and checked the ammunition. "Those men killed your brother for getting too close to the truth. They'll do the same to Sophia if they find her. The compass, it's the key, isn't it?" Abby nodded, looking down at the glowing cylinder in her hand. "According to Harrison's journal, the crystals react specifically to Blackwood blood. That's why they need Sophia, or me." A new determination settled over Abby. 3 generations of her family had protected this secret, had died for it. Now it was her turn to decide its fate. "There's a continuation of this passage behind that equipment rack," Sheriff Holbrook said, pointing. "Spotted it earlier. Might lead to the main chamber Harrison mentioned." After ensuring the sheriff was as comfortable as possible, with the lamp and gun close at hand, Abby continued alone into the deeper recesses of the mountain. The compass guided her, its blue glow intensifying as she followed a winding passage that sloped steeply downward before leveling out into a perfectly circular tunnel. This section wasn't the work of 19th-century miners with picks and shovels. The walls were smooth, almost polished, with the same crystalline deposits she'd seen earlier increasingly prevalent, catching and amplifying the compass's light. After what seemed like hours, but was likely only 40 minutes, the tunnel opened into a vast underground cavern that took her breath away. The ceiling soared at least 50 feet above, its surface embedded with thousands of blue crystals that emitted their own faint luminescence. A subterranean lake filled the center of the chamber, its water so clear and still it perfectly mirrored the glittering ceiling. At the lake's edge stood a small stone altar of sorts, engraved with the now familiar triangular symbol. Abby approached cautiously, drawn by the compass which now pulsed with almost frantic energy. As she neared the altar, the crystals in the ceiling brightened in response, their glow intensifying until the entire cavern was bathed in ethereal blue light. The effect was exactly as described in the Arapaho legend, a cave of blue fire, cold and ancient. A recess in the altar's surface matched the dimensions of the compass perfectly. Acting on instinct, Abby placed the cylinder into the indentation. It fit precisely, and as it settled into place, a mechanism within the altar activated. The stone surface split open, revealing a hidden compartment containing a leather-bound journal and a small box. The journal was newer than the ones in the workshop, dating from the 1960s, written in her father's handwriting. "I've finally found what my grandfather discovered. The potential is beyond imagination. Clean energy beyond anything in existence, or a weapon of unparalleled destruction. Harrison was right to hide it. The world isn't ready. Maybe it never will be. I've taken samples for analysis, but will seal the main chamber again. The compass remains the key, entrusted now to Ethan. To whichever Blackwood reads this in the future, the choice is yours. Reveal or protect. But remember Harrison's warning. In the wrong hands, this power brings only ruin." Abby opened the small box with trembling fingers. Inside lay a crystal the size of her thumb, pulsing with the same blue light as those in the ceiling, but more intensely, more alive somehow. It grew brighter as she touched it, resonating with something in her blood, just as Harrison had described. A sound from the tunnel entrance snapped her attention back to the present danger. Voices echoed in the passage. The men from Westridge. Resources had found their way to the main chamber. Abby quickly replaced everything but the crystal itself, which she slipped into her pocket. She needed to find another exit, another way back to the surface, to Sophia. The cavern had multiple tunnels branching from it. The compass was now locked into the altar mechanism, but the crystal in her pocket seemed to pulse more strongly when she faced the passage furthest from the one she'd entered through. Trusting her instincts and her bloodline's connection to the mysterious crystals, Abby hurried toward it. The passage climbed steadily upward, the air growing cooler, fresher. After 20 minutes of brisk hiking, she saw it. Natural light filtering through a narrow opening ahead, an exit. As she emerged onto a snowy ledge high on the mountainside, the setting sun painted the western sky in brilliant orange and gold. Abby recognized her location with a start. She stood on Carter's Ridge, the very spot where her father had supposedly fallen to his death 27 years earlier. Looking back at the carefully concealed cave entrance, understanding dawned. He hadn't fallen, he'd been pushed. After discovering exactly what she had just found, history repeating itself across generations. The sound of approaching helicopter rotors broke through her realization. A black helicopter with the Westridge Resources logo circled above the ridge, having spotted her emergence from the cave. As it descended toward a flat area nearby, Abby clutched the crystal in her pocket and faced a decision that 3 generations of Blackwoods had confronted before her: run and hide, protecting the secret at the cost of everything else, or stand and fight for the truth, whatever the consequences. The helicopter touched down, and a tall man in an expensive coat stepped out, flanked by armed security personnel. As he approached, his confident smile sent a chill through Abby that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "Miss Blackwood," he called over the dying rotor noise, "I'm Victor Randall. I believe you have something that belongs to me." Victor Randall stood before Abby like a conqueror surveying new territory, his expensive coat flapping in the mountain wind, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the helicopter journey. Behind him, 2 armed security personnel watched her with professional detachment, hands resting near their holstered weapons. 3 generations of Blackwoods have made this unnecessarily difficult, Randall said, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. "Your great-grandfather could have been a partner instead of an obstacle. Your father could have named his price. Even your brother was offered a very generous arrangement before he became problematic." Ice formed in Abby's veins. "You killed him!" Randall's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Heart attacks happen, Ms. Blackwood, especially in isolated communities, with overworked medical examiners." He gestured to the mountains around them. "Beautiful country, harsh, unforgiving. People die in these mountains all the time. Like your father, for instance." "Where's Sophia?" Abby demanded. "Your niece, resourceful girl, managed to escape my men in the tunnel collapse. My team is still searching for her." He took a step closer. "But let's focus on you. You've found it, haven't you? Harrison's secret? The blue fire?" Abby's hand closed around the crystal in her pocket. Its warmth pulsed against her palm, almost like a heartbeat. "I don't know what you're talking about." Randall's smile tightened. "Please, Miss Blackwood, you wouldn't have emerged from that specific cave entrance otherwise. The same entrance your father discovered before his tragic hiking accident." He extended his hand. "The crystal, please. And the research materials you took from the chamber, so you can do what with it? Harrison's journal said a single pound could power a city for a year or destroy it in an instant. Progress requires risk. The world needs new energy sources. Imagine the possibilities. Clean power, unlimited potential, American energy independence. Your family has been sitting on the greatest scientific discovery of the past century. My family has been protecting the world from something it's not ready for." Randall laughed, the sound devoid of warmth. "Such nobility, such arrogance. Who appointed the Blackwoods the gatekeepers of progress?" He checked his watch. "I'm a reasonable man, but my patience has limits. The crystal, please. My geologists can locate the main deposit once they have a sample to analyze. And if I refuse—" His expression hardened. "Then we take it from you and continue searching for your niece, who I believe has another piece of the puzzle we need." He nodded to his men, who stepped forward. Abby backed toward the cave entrance, mind racing. She couldn't outrun them, couldn't outfight them, but she had one advantage: Blackwood blood. Whatever connected her family to the crystals, it was something Randall couldn't replicate. "You need me," she realized aloud. "The crystals respond to Blackwood DNA. That's why you haven't just blasted your way into the mountain and taken everything. You need a Blackwood to access the main deposit." A flicker of annoyance crossed Randall's face, confirming her theory. Smart. Like your brother. He figured that out too, shortly before his heart gave out. He sighed theatrically. "Yes, the crystal's unique properties seem genetically keyed to your bloodline, a fascinating scientific anomaly we haven't yet decoded, but we will. In the meantime, you're valuable, but not irreplaceable. There's still Sophia. She'll never help you. Everyone has their price, Miss Blackwood, or their breaking point." He gestured to the helicopter. "Now shall we discuss terms like civilized people, or shall my men search you for the crystal? The choice, as they say, is yours." A distant crack echoed across the ridge, a rifle shot. One of Randall's security guards dropped to his knees, clutching his shoulder. "Get down!" the other shouted, drawing his weapon as he pushed Randall toward the helicopter. Abby didn't hesitate. She dove back into the cave entrance as more shots rang out, peppering the snow where she'd stood moments before. Inside the narrow passage, she ran blindly, the blue crystal in her pocket providing minimal light. Behind her, she heard Randall shouting orders as the helicopter engine roared to life. She needed to get deeper into the mountain, back to the network of tunnels where she might lose any pursuers. The passage sloped downward, returning her to the magnificent crystal chamber with its underground lake. But now she wasn't alone. A figure waited at the stone altar. Sophia, her face streaked with dirt, her jacket torn, but very much alive. She held Harrison's antique rifle in steady hands. "Aunt Abby!" Relief flooded her expression. "You made it out of the river passage." They embraced briefly, both too aware of the danger following to indulge in a longer reunion. "How did you find—" "Me?" Abby asked. "How did you escape the cave-in?" "I know these tunnels better than anyone except Dad." Sophia tapped her temple. "I mapped them all up here, been exploring them with Dad since I was 12. She gestured to the rifle. "Figured you might need backup when I heard the helicopter. Those shots should buy us some time, but not much. Sheriff Holbrook is injured in one of the upper chambers," Abby explained. "Broken leg, and Randall's men are still in the tunnels." Sophia nodded grimly. "Two of them, searching the north passages last I saw. The explosions separated us during the collapse." "Explosion?" "They had demolition charges. We're setting them at key structural points." Sophia's expression darkened. "Same way they tried to make Grandpa's death look like an accident. Same way they triggered a gas leak at our house a week before Dad's heart attack." The sound of voices echoing from the passage leading to Carter's Ridge spurred them into motion. "We need to move," Sophia urged. "I know a way to the surface that they haven't found yet. We can reach the sheriff on the way." As they hurried across the vast chamber toward another tunnel, Abby showed Sophia the crystal she'd taken. "Harrison's journal said this powers the compass, that it responds to our blood specifically." Sophia examined it with knowing eyes. Dad called it geological-keyed bioluminescence. The crystal structure somehow resonates with specific DNA markers. He spent years researching it. Did he know what it was? Where it came from? He had theories. They entered a narrow passage that spiraled upward. The crystalline structure isn't just rare, it's unique. Nothing like it exists anywhere else on Earth that we know of. Which means what? It's artificial? Sophia shook her head. Dad thought it might be extraterrestrial in origin. A meteor, impact millions of years ago, buried and compressed under the mountain until mining operations in the 1890s accidentally uncovered it. They paused at a junction, listening for pursuers. Hearing nothing, they took the left passage, climbing steadily upward. Harrison recognized its potential immediately, Sophia continued. Energy output unlike anything known at the time, but he also discovered its destructive capabilities when a small fragment exploded during testing, killing 2 men. That's when he sealed the main chamber and created the blood-keyed access mechanisms. He believed no single person or organization should control such power. A family trust, Abby murmured, passed from generation to generation. Exactly. The compass, the map, the knowledge, distributed among family members so no one person held all the pieces. Sophia glanced back at her aunt. You were supposed to be part of it. Dad said Grandpa had planned to tell you everything when you turned 21. But I left before then, ran away to college and never looked back. Regret washed over Abby. I abandoned my responsibility. Maybe you were fulfilling it another way, Sophia suggested. Dad always said the family needed both keepers and seekers. He was a keeper, protecting the secret. Maybe you were meant to be a seeker, gaining knowledge and perspective outside Clearwater. The passage widened into a man-made tunnel with old mining tracks running along its floor. They followed it until they reached another junction, this one marked with Harrison's triangle symbol. Sheriff Holbrook should be in a chamber just off this main passage, Abby said, recognizing their location. They found the sheriff where Abby had left him, pale from pain and blood loss, but conscious. His face registered shock and relief at seeing Sophia alive. You made it, he managed, trying to sit up straighter. Barely, Sophia replied, examining his splintered leg. We need to get you out of here. Randall and his men are in the tunnels. Victor Randall, here personally. The sheriff's expression darkened. That's not good. Man doesn't get his hands dirty unless there's billions at stake. Try trillions, Sophia said grimly. Dad calculated the potential energy output of the main deposit, a crystal formation the size of a car, could power the entire western United States for a century. Together, Abby and Sophia helped Sheriff Holbrook to his feet, supporting him between them as they continued through the tunnels. Progress was slow, but the sheriff gritted his teeth against the pain, determined not to slow them down. There's an old emergency exit about half a mile ahead, Sophia explained. Comes out near Wilkinson's property. If we can reach it, we can make it to the highway. And then what? Abby asked. Randall controls the local medical examiner, probably has influence with other officials. Who can we trust? My deputy Reeves, Sheriff Holbrook said. And Judge. Preston, they're clean, and I've got a friend at the FBI field office in Denver who owes me a favor. The distant sound of boots on stone made them freeze. Voices echoed through the tunnels, Randall's men, getting closer. In here, Sophia whispered, guiding them into what appeared to be a dead-end passage. She pressed against a specific stone, in the wall, and a section of the rock face slid away, revealing a narrow crawl space. Harrison's escape route. Dad and I found it last year. The passage was barely wide enough for them to drag Sheriff Holbrook through, and it forced them to crawl single file through near-total darkness. The only light came from the blue crystal, which Abby now held out before her like a talisman. Its glow seemed to strengthen the further they progressed, as if responding to their desperation. After what felt like an eternity of crawling through the claustrophobic space, the passage widened into a natural chimney that stretched upward toward a circle of grey winter sky. Metal rungs had been driven into the rock wall, creating a crude ladder. "Can you climb?" Abby asked Sheriff Holbrook. He nodded grimly. "One-legged if I have to. Not staying down here to be target practice." The climb was agonizing to watch. Sheriff Holbrook pulled himself up rung by rung, his face contorted in pain, while Sophia climbed just below him, ready to catch him if he fell. Abby brought up the rear, constantly glancing downward for signs of pursuit. When they finally emerged into the fading daylight, They found themselves in a dense stand of pines, the snow beneath them disturbed only by animal tracks. Sheriff Holbrook collapsed against a tree trunk, his face grey with exhaustion and pain. "Wilkinson's farm should be about 2 miles that way," Sophia said, pointing east. "But we'll never make it carrying the sheriff." Abby surveyed their surroundings, thinking quickly. "You go, get help. I'll stay with Sheriff Holbrook." "Too dangerous," the sheriff objected. "If Randall's men find this exit, I'll lead them away from you." Abby decided, the crystal warm in her hand. "They want this more than they want us. Sophia, take the sheriff's gun, head for Wilkinson's, then call Deputy Reeves. Tell him everything." Sophia hesitated, then embraced her aunt fiercely. "I just found you. I'm not losing another family member to those bastards." "You won't," Abby promised. "Blackwoods are survivors, right? Now go, before we lose what daylight's left." After Sophia disappeared into the trees, Abby helped make Sheriff Holbrook as comfortable as possible, using pine boughs to create a makeshift shelter against the wind and falling snow. "Those crystals," the sheriff said, watching the blue glow pulse in Abby's palm. "What exactly are they?" "I don't know," Abby admitted. "But my family has been protecting them for generations. Harrison thought they were too dangerous for the world. My father agreed. Ethan, too, apparently." "And you? What do you think?" Abby stared at the crystal, transfixed by its otherworldly light. "I think power like this doesn't belong to corporations or governments, but burying it forever isn't the answer either." She pocketed the crystal. "First, we survive. Then we decide what happens to Harrison's legacy." Night fell quickly in the mountains, the temperature dropping with the sun. Abby maintained a small fire, just enough for warmth without creating a beacon for searchers. The sheriff drifted in and out of consciousness, his condition deteriorating. With each passing hour, Abby checked her watch. Sophia had been gone for 3 hours. Surely she should have reached out for help by now. Unless she'd been captured, or worse, a twig snapped in the darkness beyond their small camp. Abby froze, listening intently. Another snap, closer this time. Someone was approaching, trying to move quietly through the underbrush. She grabbed a burning branch from the fire, holding it like a weapon as she faced the direction of the sound. "Whoever's there, show yourself," she demanded. A figure emerged from the shadows, hands raised. Not Randall or his men, but a young deputy Abby didn't recognize. "Deputy Reeves," he introduced himself. "Sheriff Holbrook's partner. Sophia Blackwood sent me. We've got an ambulance waiting on the logging road, but we need to move fast." Relief flooded through Abby until she noticed something off about the deputy's appearance. His uniform was too crisp, his boots too polished for someone who'd been trudging through snowy woods, and his gun holster was a different model than Sheriff Holbrook's. "Where's Sophia now?" Abby asked cautiously. "Safe. At the station with my team." His gaze flicked to Sheriff Holbrook's unconscious form, then back to Abby. "Is that the crystal she mentioned? The one that glows?" Abby's suspicion crystallized into certainty. Sophia would never have gone to the station, and Sheriff Holbrook doesn't have a partner named Reeves. The imposter's friendly expression vanished. He reached for his weapon, but Abby was faster, throwing the burning branch directly at his face. He recoiled with a shout of pain, giving Abby precious seconds to drag Sheriff Holbrook deeper into the woods. Gunshots echoed behind them as the fake deputy recovered and pursued. Abby pulled the sheriff's barely conscious form behind a fallen log, just as bullets splintered the bark, inches from her head. "Come out, Miss Blackwood," the man called. "Mr. Randall doesn't want to hurt you, he just wants what's rightfully his." "Nothing here belongs to Randall," Abby shouted back, scanning their surroundings for escape routes or weapons. "The mineral rights do. Westridge Resources owns every claim in this valley now. Whatever your family found is legally ours." More footsteps crunched through the snow, multiple pursuers closing in from different directions. Abby was trapped, with an injured man to protect and nowhere to run. The crystal in her pocket suddenly blazed with intense light, as if activated by her fear. Its blue radiance penetrated her clothing, illuminating the clearing like a supernatural beacon. "There!" someone shouted. "Behind the log!" Abby pulled out the crystal, its brightness almost blinding now. Heat radiated from it, warming her fingers despite the frigid air. As the armed men closed in, the crystal's pulsing accelerated, matching the frantic rhythm of her heart. A memory surfaced, Harrison's journal entry. The crystal structure is unstable when subjected to extreme pressure or heat. The resulting energy release is catastrophic. Understanding dawned. The crystal responded to her emotions, her blood, and right now, with her life threatened, it was building towards some kind of release. "Stay back," she warned, holding the glowing crystal aloft. "You have no idea what this can do." The fake deputy emerged from the trees, gun trained on her. "Put it down, Miss Blackwood, now." Instead, Abby closed her eyes and focused on her fear, her anger, channeling every emotion into her connection with the crystal. Its heat intensified, becoming almost unbearable against her skin. "Last chance," the man warned, stepping closer. The crystal's blue glow turned blinding white. Energy crackled around Abby's hand like miniature lightning. The armed men halted, suddenly uncertain. "Fire!" someone ordered from the darkness. As the first shot rang out, the crystal exploded with a concussive force that knocked everyone off their feet. A pillar of blue light shot skyward from Abby's hand, splitting the night like a beacon. The energy wave rippled outward, dropping the armed men like puppets with cut strings. Abby remained standing, untouched by the blast, the crystal now dormant in her palm. Power hummed through her veins, a connection deeper than she could comprehend. For a moment, she understood what Harrison had discovered. Not just an energy source, but a symbiotic relationship between the crystals and her family's unique genetic makeup. In the distance, she heard new voices, saw flashlights bobbing through the trees, but these weren't Randall's men. At their lead was Sophia, accompanied by a middle-aged woman in a judge's robes and several legitimate sheriff's deputies. "Aunt Abby," Sophia rushed forward, embracing her. "What was that light? We saw it from miles away." "The crystal," Abby explained weakly, suddenly exhausted. "It protected us." Judge Preston approached, surveying the unconscious forms of Randall's men with raised eyebrows. "Ms. Blackwood, I've heard quite a story from your niece about crystals that respond to blood, corporate killers, and a 100-year-old family secret." She smiled slightly. "Under normal circumstances, I'd be skeptical." "And now?" Abby asked. The judge gestured to the blue light still faintly visible in the night sky. "Now I think we'd better get Sheriff Holbrook medical attention, these men, into custody, and have a very serious conversation about what exactly is hidden in these mountains." As paramedics tended to Sheriff Holbrook and deputies secured the armed men, Sophia pulled Abby aside. "Dad left something for you," she said quietly, placing a small wooden box in Abby's hands. "Said if anything happened to him, I should give it to you when the time was right." Inside lay a weathered envelope addressed simply, "To my sister when she returns." Abby opened it with trembling fingers and read her brother's final message. "Abby, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I always knew you'd come back someday. You're a Blackwood after all, and none of us can escape our legacy forever. What Harrison found isn't just a power source, it's a responsibility. The crystals chose our family for a reason. They respond to us, communicate with us in ways science can't explain. I've taught Sophia everything I know, but she needs you, the keeper and the seeker, working together at last. The world isn't ready for this power, but someday it might be. Until then, the Blackwoods stand guard. I forgive you for leaving. I hope you can forgive me for staying. Your brother." Ethan tears blurred Abby's vision as she folded the letter. Across the clearing, Sophia stood talking with the deputies, Harrison's rifle still clutched in her hands, her stance so reminiscent of Ethan that it made Abby's heart ache. The crystal in her palm had returned to its gentle blue pulse, a rhythm that somehow felt like a heartbeat, not just her own, but connected to something larger, to Sophia, to Ethan's memory, to her father and Harrison before him. A legacy written in blood and crystal, stretching back through generations and forward, into an uncertain future. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the snow-covered peaks in gold and rose, Abby made her decision. Unlike her father and brother, she wouldn't hide the truth away completely, but neither would she let it fall into the wrong hands. The Blackwood legacy would continue, but on new terms. With her architectural expertise and Sophia's intimate knowledge of the mountain, they would create a new kind of protection for Harrison's discovery. Not just physical barriers and blood-keyed locks, but legal safeguards, scientific oversight, ethical frameworks. The crystal warmed in her hand, as if approving her plan. For a moment, Abby could almost imagine it was communicating with her, the way Ethan's letter suggested, a connection deeper than genetics, older than her family's history in these mountains. "What happens now?" Sophia asked, joining her as they watched the sunrise. Abby placed her arm around her niece's shoulders. "Now we do what Blackwoods have always done. We protect what's precious. We survive, and maybe, just maybe, we change the world." 6 months later, summer transformed the Bighorn Mountains, erasing all traces of the deadly blizzard that had changed Abby Blackwood's life. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and the air hummed with insect life as she hiked the familiar trail. To Carter's Ridge, Sophia beside her. "Still can't believe you're actually moving back," Sophia said, adjusting her backpack. "Thought you hated small-town life." Abby smiled, pausing to take in the valley below. Clearwater nestled among the pines, looking impossibly picturesque from this vantage point. "I hated being trapped. Different thing entirely." In the months since that fateful January night, much had changed. Victor Randall faced federal charges for conspiracy and murder after Sheriff Holbrook's testimony and evidence from Ethan's meticulous records. Westridge Resources' stock had plummeted amid the scandal, their mining claims tied up in litigation, but the greater changes had been personal. Abby had taken a leave of absence from her Boston firm, initially planning to stay in Clearwater only, until Sophia graduated. Somewhere along the way, temporary arrangements had evolved into permanent decisions. "The renovation plans for the house look amazing," Sophia said, as they continued their ascent. "Dad would have loved what you're doing with his workshop." "Our workshop now," Abby corrected. "Your acceptance to Northwestern doesn't mean you're escaping family responsibilities entirely." Sophia grinned. "Wouldn't dream of it. Besides, I'm only studying engineering so I can better understand what we're protecting." They reached the spot where, 6 months earlier, Abby had emerged from the mountain to face Randall and his men. The cave entrance had been carefully concealed again, indistinguishable from the surrounding rock face. Only those with Blackwood, blood, and the knowledge passed down through generations could identify the subtle markers Harrison had left. Abby removed a small leather pouch from her jacket pocket, extracting the blue crystal that had saved their lives that winter night. In daylight, it appeared almost ordinary, a translucent blue stone that could pass for sapphire to the untrained eye. But as her fingers closed around it, it awakened, emitting its soft cerulean glow. "Ready?" she asked. Sophia nodded, producing a similar crystal from her own pocket. Together, they approached a seemingly solid rock face, pressing their glowing crystals against specific points. The stones responded, their light intensifying as a previously invisible seam in the rock face revealed itself. The hidden door swung inward silently, revealing a passage that hadn't existed 6 months ago. A new entrance to the crystal cavern that Abby had designed and Sophia had helped construct, incorporating modern security measures alongside Harrison's blood-keyed mechanisms. Inside, the tunnel looked nothing like the rough-hewn passages they'd navigated during the blizzard. Steel supports reinforced the walls, and soft LED lighting illuminated the path. At regular intervals, sophisticated sensors monitored air quality, structural integrity, and the presence of any unauthorized visitors. "Dr. Levinson's team arrives next week," Sophia said as they descended toward the main chamber. "Judge Preston vetted them personally." After extensive discussion, Abby and Sophia had decided that complete secrecy was no longer viable. With Randall's arrest making headlines and rumors spreading about what lay beneath the Blackwood property, they'd opted for controlled disclosure to a small team of trusted scientists, bound by strict confidentiality agreements and overseen by Judge Preston's specially convened Federal Oversight Committee. "How's Sheriff Holbrook doing with the security protocols?" Abby asked. "Still complaining about the paperwork, but he's got the checkpoint system running smoothly. Nobody gets within 5 miles of the main entrance without us knowing about it." They reached the massive crystal cavern, now transformed by their careful renovations. A network of catwalks provided safe access across the subterranean lake, while specialized equipment monitored the crystal formations embedded in the ceiling. At the center, where the stone altar had stood for over a century, now rose a state-of-the-art research station. Dr. Eleanor Chen, the quantum physicist who'd been the first scientist they'd cautiously approached, looked up from her instruments as they entered. "Perfect timing," she called. "We've just completed the energy output measurements you requested." Abby had selected Dr. Chen not just for her scientific credentials, but for her ethical stance on emerging technologies. The petite scientist had spent her career advocating for responsible research practices, particularly regarding discoveries with military applications. "What's the verdict?" Abby asked, joining her at the monitoring station. Dr. Chen's expression was a mixture of awe and concern. "Your family wasn't exaggerating. The crystal's energy density exceeds anything in our current theoretical framework. A sample the size of a golf ball contains enough potential energy to power a small city for a year. And the instability issues. That's where it gets interesting." Dr. Chen pulled up a series of graphs on her tablet. "The crystals appear to shift between stable and unstable states based on, well, frankly, based on the emotional state of anyone with Blackwood DNA in proximity." Sophia leaned in, fascinated. "So what happened that night on the ridge when Aunt Abby made the crystal explode was a direct response to her fear and anger," Dr. Chen confirmed. "The crystals contain a molecular structure that somehow resonates with specific genetic markers in your family's DNA. It's like they're tuned to you." "Any progress on their origin?" Abby asked. Dr. Chen shook her head. "The composition doesn't match any known terrestrial mineral formation. The crystalline structure contains elements we can't even classify yet, but their age—" She paused, double-checking her data. "Carbon dating puts them at approximately 65 million years old. The end of the dinosaur era," Sophia noted. "When that massive asteroid hit Earth?" "Exactly." Dr. Chen's eyes gleamed with scientific excitement. "My working theory is that these crystals are fragments of that asteroid, or perhaps another impact event from the same period, something that brought non-terrestrial material to this specific location." Abby circled the monitoring station, considering the implications. "And somehow, over millions of years, they developed this strange affinity for our family's genetic structure. Or perhaps your ancestors developed an affinity for them," Dr. Chen suggested. "Evolutionary adaptation works in mysterious ways. Maybe proximity to these crystals over generations created subtle genetic changes in your family line." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Holbrook, moving with a slight limp, a permanent reminder of his broken leg during the blizzard. He'd become their most trusted ally, coordinating security for what they now called the Blackwood Research Initiative. "We've got a situation topside," he announced without preamble. "A government convoy just passed the outer checkpoint, Department of Energy credentials." Abby and Sophia exchanged concerned glances. Though they'd established legal protections, through Judge Preston's connections, they'd known it was only a matter of time before federal interest in the crystals intensified. "I'll handle it," Abby decided. "Sophia, stay with Dr. Chen and prepare the Level 1 disclosure package." Level 1 disclosure was their most restrictive information-sharing protocol, revealing just enough about the crystal's energy potential to satisfy official curiosity while concealing their more extraordinary properties, particularly their connection to Blackwood DNA. "Are the motion sensors active in the lower tunnels?" Sophia asked Sheriff Holbrook. He nodded. "And I've got deputies stationed at all registered entrances. Nobody's getting in without going through proper channels." 30 minutes later, Abby stood in the renovated living room of the Blackwood home, facing 3 representatives from the Department of Energy. Their leader, a stern-faced woman who introduced herself as Director Margaret Winters, made no attempt to conceal her impatience. "Ms. Blackwood, we've been monitoring the unusual energy signatures emanating from this property for months. Our satellite imaging shows evidence of a significant power source beneath these mountains." Director Winters placed a folder on the coffee table. "This is a national security matter now." Abby remained outwardly calm, though the crystal in her pocket warmed in response to her tension. "The Blackwood Research Initiative operates under federal oversight, Director. Judge Preston's committee has full jurisdiction. A small-town judge has no authority over matters of national security," Winters dismissed. "We're prepared to invoke eminent domain if necessary." "That would be unwise." Abby opened her own folder, sliding across documents bearing presidential and Supreme Court seals. "These executive orders and judicial rulings establish our legal standing. The crystals remain under Blackwood guardianship with regulated scientific access through approved channels." Winters scanned the documents, her expression hardening. "You've been busy. 3 generations of Blackwoods have protected this discovery." Abby replied evenly. "We've learned to be thorough. Protected or hoarded?" Winters challenged. "Do you have any idea what this energy source could mean for national defense, for American strategic interests?" "I know exactly what it means," Abby said. "That's why we've structured the initiative as we have. The crystal's energy potential will be developed for civilian applications only through international scientific collaboration." Winters laughed coldly. "Very idealistic, Miss Blackwood, but this isn't a decision for one family to make." "Perhaps not." Sheriff Holbrook entered, accompanied by Judge Preston and a distinguished older gentleman Winters clearly recognized, based on her sudden discomfort. "Senator Clark," she acknowledged stiffly. "Senator William Clark, chairman of the Energy Committee, and a long-time advocate for scientific transparency," nodded cordially. "Director Winters, I'm surprised to see you operating outside your authorization parameters. The department has full authority to investigate anomalous energy signatures," she insisted. "Within established protocols," the senator countered. "The Blackwood Initiative was granted special status by executive order just last month. Surely that information reached your desk." Winter's expression confirmed it had, and that she'd chosen to ignore it. Judge Preston stepped forward. "The legal framework is non-negotiable, Director. The Blackwood family maintains primary oversight, with my committee providing judicial supervision and Senator Clark's Energy Commission handling federal interests." "You're all making a mistake," Winters warned. "Power like this can't be controlled by private citizens. That's exactly why the Blackwoods have created this structured approach, Senator Clark replied. No single entity, not a family, not a corporation, not even a government agency, should have exclusive control over such a discovery. After the department representatives reluctantly departed, Abby found herself alone with Senator Clark on the porch, watching the government vehicles disappear down the mountain road. They'll be back, the senator warned, with different tactics, different people, when word gets out about what you found, and it will, eventually, the pressure will be immense. We're prepared for that, Abby assured him. The legal framework is just the beginning. The technical safeguards are considerably more robust. Senator Clark studied her thoughtfully. Your brother was right to contact me last year. He sensed what was coming. Abby turned to him in surprise. Ethan reached out to you shortly before his death, said he had discovered something that could change the world, but needed help creating the right protective structure. The senator's weathered face softened. He spoke very highly of you, even though you'd been estranged. Said if anything happened to him, you were the one who could bridge worlds, who understood both the importance of roots and the necessity of wings. Tears stung Abby's eyes. Even in his final days, Ethan had been planning, preparing, believing she would return and take up the family mantle. Later that evening, Abby and Sophia sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance across the yard as twilight descended. The renovated Blackwood home hummed with new purpose behind them, part living space, part research coordination center, part museum of Harrison's legacy. Do you think we're doing the right thing? Sophia asked quietly. Great, Grandpa Harrison. Kept everything hidden. Dad, too, mostly. Now we're opening it up to scientists, politicians. Limited access, carefully controlled, Abby clarified. But yes, it's a different approach. She twirled her crystal between her fingers, its blue glow casting soft shadows. Harrison did what was necessary for his time. The world wasn't ready. Then, and it is now. Sophia sounded skeptical, ready enough to begin the conversation. The crystals aren't just an energy source, they're a responsibility. One that might be too large for just our family to bear alone anymore. Sophia was quiet for a moment, processing this. What about the connection to our blood? Dr. Chen still doesn't understand why the crystals respond to us specifically. Some mysteries should remain mysteries, at least for now. Abby smiled. We don't have to share everything. The distant sound of a vehicle approaching made them both tense, but it was only Dr. Chen returning from town with dinner. As she joined them on the porch, her excitement was palpable. I've been analyzing the data from the resonance tests, she said, barely pausing to set down the food containers. The crystals don't just respond to your DNA, they're actually communicating through it. Communicating? Abby repeated. Like sending messages? More like establishing a connection, a symbiosis. Dr. Chen pulled out her tablet, showing them a series of waveform patterns. These energy pulses aren't random. They're organized, almost like a language, and they change based on which Blackwood is interacting with them. They react differently to me than to Aunt Abby? Sophia asked. Dr. Chen nodded enthusiastically. Distinctly different patterns, as if they recognize you individually, and the longer you interact with them, the more synchronized the patterns become. A chill ran down Abby's spine as she remembered the sensation during the confrontation with Randall's men, the feeling that the crystal wasn't just reacting to her emotions, but amplifying them, channeling them, almost guiding her actions. What exactly are you suggesting, Dr. Chen? She asked carefully. The scientist hesitated, suddenly aware of how her enthusiasm might be received. I'm not entirely sure yet, but I think the crystals might be more than just an energy source. They might be a form of intelligence, one that's been trying to establish contact with your family for generations. Sophia's eyes widened. You're saying they're alive, conscious? Not in any way do we traditionally define those terms, Dr. Chen clarified, but they exhibit behaviors consistent with some form of awareness. The question is, why your family? Why the Blackwoods specifically? Abby recalled Harrison's journals, her father's research, Ethan's notes, generations of Blackwoods drawn to the mountain, to the crystals, feeling a connection they couldn't fully articulate but couldn't ignore. Great-Grandpa Harrison was the first to find them, Sophia said, but maybe that's not the whole story. Maybe they found him. The crystal in Abby's hand pulsed, its rhythm suddenly matching her heartbeat exactly, a sensation she'd experienced several times since the blizzard washed over her, a presence just beyond conscious perception, like a whispered conversation in another room. Whatever they are, whatever they want, Abby said finally, our job remains the same. We protect them from those who would exploit them, and we protect the world from their power until we truly understand it. As darkness fell over the mountains, the three women continued their discussion on the porch, unaware they were being observed. In the woods beyond the property, a solitary figure watched through high-powered binoculars. Unlike Director Winter's official government team, this observer operated in the shadows, serving interests that transcended national boundaries. The observer spoke quietly into a secure satellite phone. Confirmation on the Blackwood anomaly. The crystals are active, and the genetic link is verified. Both targets display the same resonance patterns as their predecessors. A voice responded, continue surveillance, no intervention yet. We've waited over a century for the sequence to mature. We can wait a little longer. The observer packed away the surveillance equipment and melted into the forest, leaving no trace. Above, the stars emerged one by one, including one that didn't appear on any astronomical chart, a light that had maintained its position for decades, watching over the mountain where, millions of years ago, something had arrived from the depths of space and embedded itself within the Earth's crust, waiting for the right genetic sequence to evolve, for the right family line to forge a connection. Inside the house, Abby Blackwood felt the crystal warm against her skin as she studied Harrison's journals by lamplight, certain she'd missed something important in his careful documentation. A particular phrase caught her attention, words she'd overlooked before. The crystals dream when we dream. They remember what we forget. They have been waiting for something, or someone. I fear I am not the one they seek, merely the guardian of the gate. The true awakening lies generations hence when the bloodline reaches its intended form. Abby closed the journal, unsettled. Outside her window, a shooting star blazed across the night sky, or perhaps something else entirely, its blue trail momentarily, illuminating the mountains that had kept their secrets for so long, and would keep them still until the time was right for truth to emerge. The crystal in her palm pulsed once, twice, then settled into perfect synchronization with her heartbeat. Keeper and key bound together across time and space, the legacy of the Blackwoods, extending far beyond the hidden fortune Harrison had discovered into realms even Abby couldn't yet imagine. 1 year later, the anniversary of the blizzard arrived with unseasonable warmth, the Bighorn Mountains basking in a January thaw that locals called a miracle and scientists attributed to shifting weather patterns. For Abby Blackwood, the date carried multiple significance. 1 year since she'd returned to Clearwater, since she'd discovered the truth about her brother's death, since the crystals had awakened to her touch. Standing in the newly constructed observation platform overlooking the main crystal chamber, Abby watched researchers in specialized protective gear collect measurements from the largest formation. The cavern had been transformed into the world's most secure and advanced research facility, combining cutting-edge technology with the ancient security measures Harrison had designed a century earlier. Quarterly reports are ready for review, Dr. Chen announced, joining Abby at the railing. Energy output has increased 8% since last month. Abby frowned. Any explanation for the increase? None that fits conventional science. Dr. Chen had abandoned academic restraint when discussing the crystal's more inexplicable properties. But it coincides with Sophia's return from Northwestern for winter break. The correlation didn't surprise Abby. The crystal's responsiveness to Blackwood proximity had been thoroughly documented over the past year, though no one, not even Dr. Chen, fully understood the mechanism. "Where is my niece anyway?" Abby asked, testing the new resonance chamber with Dr. Patel. Their theory about harmonizing multiple crystal frequencies is showing promise. The facility now housed a diverse team of scientists from various disciplines, each carefully vetted and bound by stringent confidentiality agreements. The Blackwood Initiative had evolved into a hybrid organization, part private research foundation, part government oversight program, part international scientific coalition, all structured to prevent any single entity from controlling the crystal's power. Senator Clark had proven invaluable in navigating Washington's treacherous political waters, while Judge Preston maintained judicial firewalls against corporate interests like the now disgraced Westridge Resources. Victor Randall remained in federal custody, though his trial had been classified and moved to a secure facility after he'd attempted to bargain with what he knew about the crystals. Abby's secure phone vibrated. A message from Sheriff Holbrook at the surface checkpoint. "Unscheduled visitor. And says his name is Malcolm Hayes. Claims to be an old colleague of your father's." A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the cavern's temperature. The name was vaguely familiar from her father's journals. A fellow researcher he'd corresponded with shortly before his death. "I need to head topside," she told Dr. Chen. "Continue with today's testing schedule, but no new extraction attempts until I return." The journey to the surface took 15 minutes via the secure elevator they'd installed, bypassing the labyrinthine tunnel network that still served as emergency evacuation routes. As the doors opened into the Blackwood home's renovated basement, Abby felt the crystal in her pocket warm against her thigh, a warning she'd learned to heed over the past year. Sheriff Holbrook waited in the living room with an elderly man whose weathered face and alert eyes suggested a lifetime of outdoor work and careful observation. Despite his apparent age, at least 80, he stood straight-backed and steady. "Miss Blackwood," he greeted her, his voice surprisingly strong. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment. I've been following your work from afar." "Mr. Hayes," Abby acknowledged cautiously. "You knew my father? And your grandfather before him?" Hayes smiled sadly. "I've known 4 generations of Blackwoods, though always at a distance. Your family has been remarkably consistent in its protectiveness." Sheriff Holbrook shifted subtly, hand near his weapon. The protocols for unexpected visitors were clear, polite, but vigilant, especially regarding anyone claiming historical connections to the family. "What brings you here after all this time?" Abby asked. Hayes reached slowly into his jacket, noting the sheriff's tension. "May I? It's just a photograph." He withdrew a faded image. A group of men standing before what appeared to be a mine entrance. Abby recognized her grandfather immediately, much younger than she'd ever known him. Beside him stood a young man who must have been Hayes, and between them, "Is that Harrison?" she asked, stunned. Hayes nodded. "Harrison Blackwood in 1952, age 94. This was taken 3 months before his death." Abby stared at the image in disbelief. The history she'd pieced together from family records indicated Harrison had died in 1923. "That's impossible," she said. "The family Bible, the property records." "All carefully manufactured," Hayes confirmed. "Harrison faked his death in the 1920s when interest in his mining claims intensified. lived another 30 years in seclusion, working to understand what he'd discovered. The crystal in Abby's pocket pulsed warmly, as if responding to the revelation. "You expect me to believe this based on one photograph?" she challenged me. Hayes smiled. "I expected skepticism. Harrison warned me the family would be cautious, especially after what happened to your father." He reached into his pocket again, this time withdrawing a blue crystal similar to the one Abby carried, but with a different internal structure. More densely packed, its glow slightly greener. Sheriff Holbrook drew his weapon immediately. "Put that down, sir." "It's all right," Abby said, staring at the crystal. Unlike the ones they'd been studying, this one didn't react to her presence. It maintained a steady, self-contained luminescence. "This is from the second deposit," Hayes explained. "The one Harrison discovered in 1931, in a location he shared with no one, not even your grandfather. I'm the last living member of the original oversight group he established, what you might call the first Blackwood Initiative." Over coffee at the kitchen table, with Sheriff Holbrook maintaining a watchful presence, Hayes revealed a history that contradicted everything Abby thought she knew about her great-grandfather. Harrison realized early on that the crystals weren't just an energy source, Hayes explained. They're a form of communication technology, possibly the most sophisticated ever discovered on Earth. "Communication with what?" Abby asked, though she suspected the answer from Dr. Chen's recent findings. That remains unclear, even after a century of study. But Harrison believed they originated from a civilization beyond our solar system, one that seeded these communication nodes on various planets, including Earth. Sophia arrived as Hayes was explaining the theory, having been summoned by Abby's text. She listened intently, the scientific education she'd been pursuing at Northwestern, giving her a framework for understanding Hayes's explanations. "You're saying the crystals are like interstellar cell towers?" she asked. Hayes chuckled. "An apt modern analogy. They appear to transmit and receive across vast distances, using principles that defy our current understanding of physics. But they require specific biological interfaces. Blackwood DNA," Abby supplied. "Not precisely." Hayes' expression grew serious. "Any human DNA provides some level of interface capability, but certain genetic sequences allow for stronger connections. The Blackwood lineage happens to carry a particularly compatible sequence, one that's been gradually optimizing over generations." "Optimizing?" Sophia echoed. "You mean evolving? Or being guided toward a specific configuration?" Hayes suggested. "Harrison discovered that prolonged exposure to the crystals appears to introduce subtle changes to reproductive cells. Each generation of Blackwoods showed incrementally stronger connections to the crystals." The implications sent a chill through Abby. "Are you suggesting these crystals have been breeding us? For what purpose?" "That's the question that has driven our research for a century," Hayes acknowledged. "Harrison established the original secrecy protocols, not just to prevent misuse of the crystal's power, but to protect your family from those who might see you as research subjects rather than people." Sophia leaned forward, scientifically intrigued. Despite the disturbing implications, the resonance patterns Dr. Chen documented, are they communication attempts? We believe so. Think of it as learning a language with no point of reference, like deciphering hieroglyphics before the Rosetta Stone. We've identified patterns that appear to be questions, responses, even emotional states, but the full meaning eludes us. "Why?" "Come forward now," Abby asked. "Why reveal this after a century of secrecy?" Hayes sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 80-plus years. "Because the timetable has accelerated. The crystals have begun a synchronization phase we've never observed before." He placed a small device on the table, something like a Geiger counter, but with unfamiliar components. "This measures the harmonic resonance between crystal deposits. For decades, it's been stable. In the past year, it's increased exponentially. Since the blizzard, Abby realized. Since I returned to Clearwater. Since both remaining Blackwoods came into direct contact with the primary deposit, Hayes corrected. The genetic sequence appears to have reached its intended configuration. With your generation, Sheriff Holbrook, who had remained silent throughout the explanation, finally spoke. Are we talking about some kind of activation? Should we be concerned? Hayes considered the question carefully. Harrison believed the system was designed as a benevolent technology, a gift or an invitation. But he also acknowledged the risk that we might be misinterpreting everything, projecting our human understanding onto something fundamentally alien. The crystal in Abby's pocket grew warmer, its pulse synchronizing with her increasing heart rate. She withdrew it, placing it on the table beside Hayes's specimen. The two crystals reacted immediately, hers glowing brighter, his shifting in color to match. They're connecting, Sophia whispered. Yes, Hayes confirmed. And this is just between two small samples. Imagine the connection forming between the main deposits. Where exactly is this second deposit? Abby asked. Hayes hesitated. Harrison was explicit that this information should only be shared once the synchronization began. It's located beneath Medicine Mountain, about 60 miles northwest of here. We've maintained a small research facility there since the 1950s, disguised as a private astronomical observatory. We need to see it, Abby decided. By nightfall, they were airborne in a helicopter bearing the Blackwood Initiative logo, soaring over the darkened wilderness toward the coordinates Hayes had provided. Sophia sat beside Abby, both women clutching their crystals, which had grown increasingly active as they traveled northwest. Do you think we can trust him? Sophia asked over the headset, her voice barely audible above the helicopter noise. The crystals seem to, Abby replied, watching as her specimen pulsed in rhythm with their movement. And his story explains things that never made sense in our family history. The helicopter crested a ridge, revealing a cluster of domed buildings. Nestled against a mountainside, the supposed astronomical observatory. As they descended toward the landing pad, floodlights illuminated a facility far more substantial than Hayes had implied, with multiple structures and what appeared to be a small residential compound. Welcome to Site B, Hayes said as they disembarked. Established 1932 under the guise of the Western Mountain Research Association. We've maintained continuous observation of the secondary deposit for 90 years. A small team of researchers greeted them, all elderly like Hayes, the youngest appearing to be in his 60s. The last of Harrison's original team? Abby asked. Hayes nodded. Most are descendants of the original researchers. The knowledge has been passed down just as in your family. We've maintained strict security protocols, no digital records, limited recruitment, complete isolation from government and corporate interests. The main research facility was housed beneath the largest observatory dome, accessible via a retinal scanner that Hayes explained had been modified to detect specific genetic markers, not just identity, but compatibility with the crystals. Only those with certain genetic sequences can access the lower levels, he explained, a precaution Harrison insisted upon. The elevator that carried them downward was unlike the modern one at the Blackwood facility. This was original 1930s technology, meticulously maintained but fundamentally unchanged. As they descended, Abby's crystal grew hot in her hand, its light now bright enough to cast shadows. They're responding to proximity, Hayes observed. This is new behavior since your activation of the primary deposit. The elevator opened onto a scene that momentarily robbed Abby of breath. Unlike the cavern beneath her property, this chamber was smaller but more intensely concentrated with crystals. They covered every surface, floor, walls, ceiling, creating a space that seemed constructed entirely of blue light. The secondary node, Hayes announced unnecessarily. As Abby and Sophia stepped into the chamber, the entire room pulsed once, then again, the light momentarily dimming before returning brighter than before. The crystals in their hands grew almost too hot to hold. "They recognize you," one of the elderly researchers observed with something like reverence. In the center of the chamber stood an apparatus unlike anything at the Blackwood facility, a chair-like structure composed partially of metal and partially of crystal growths that had been shaped into support structures. Harrison called it the interface, Hayes explained. He theorized it was meant to facilitate direct communication, but we've never been able to activate it fully. No one in your family has visited this site since your grandfather, and he lacked the genetic refinement to establish connection. Abby approached the structure cautiously. Up close, she could see intricate patterns within the crystal components, circuitry or writing or something beyond human categorization. "What exactly happens if someone sits in it?" she asked. "Nothing in our experience," Hayes admitted. "We've had various researchers attempt connections over the decades. The crystals respond minimally, but nothing like what Harrison described in his theoretical models." Sophia circled the apparatus, her scientific training evident in her methodical examination. "These formations aren't natural growth patterns. They've been deliberately shaped, designed for specific functions." She pointed to a depression in the back support. "This looks sized for crystal insertion." Hayes nodded. Harrison believed the user's personal crystal served as an activation key. "We've tried various combinations over the years. Abby's crystal now pulsed in perfect synchronization with the chamber around them, as if part of a larger whole, calling to itself." Looking at Sophia, she saw her niece experiencing the same phenomenon. "I think it needs both of us," Abby suggested. "Two Blackwoods, two crystals, completing the circuit." Hayes looked alarmed. "We have no way of predicting what might happen." Harrison's notes suggested full activation might have consequences beyond the immediate environment. But Abby felt a certainty that transcended rational caution, a knowledge that seemed to flow from the crystal into her consciousness. "This is what they've been waiting for. What Harrison discovered, what my father and Ethan protected, the culmination of a process that began generations ago." Sophia met her gaze, the same understanding reflected in her eyes. Two branches of the family tree reunited, the keeper and the seeker together at last. Before Hayes or the other researchers could protest further, Abby seated herself in the interface chair. The crystal formations immediately responded, subtle adjustments rippling through their structure to better accommodate her form. The depression Sophia had identified glowed with increased intensity. "Here," Abby said, offering her crystal to Sophia. "You should do it. You're the future of the Blackwood line." Sophia took the crystal, its light pulsing between their hands during the transfer. Without hesitation, she placed it into the depression in the chair's back. The effect was immediate. The entire chamber intensified, the blue light shifting through the spectrum until it stabilized at a vibrant purple hue. The crystal formations around the chair extended, gently enveloping Abby's arms and legs, not restraining but connecting. She felt a strange doubling of consciousness, still herself, but also something more, something expanded beyond normal perception. "Aunt Abby?" Sophia called, concern evident in her voice. "I'm here," Abby assured her, though her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. "It's incredible. I can feel them, the crystals, all of them, connected across distances. They're part of a network, a system spanning—" She struggled to conceptualize what she was experiencing. Spanning worlds. Hayes and his team had activated various instruments, recording everything with the mixture of scientific precision and awe that had apparently characterized their work for decades. "What are they?" Hayes asked urgently. "What do they want?" Abby closed her eyes, allowing the flood of information to wash through her consciousness. "They're a library," she said finally, a repository of knowledge from a civilization that existed millions of years ago. They sent these seed crystals to compatible worlds throughout the galaxy, time capsules, waiting for species to evolve that could access them. What kind of knowledge? Sophia asked. Everything. Their history, science, art, philosophy, the complete record of a species that faced extinction and chose to preserve their essence this way. Abby's voice grew stronger as understanding crystallized. They've been guiding our family for generations, subtly influencing our genetic development to create compatible interfaces, humans who could withstand direct neural connection without harm. Hayes exchanged glances with his colleagues. Are they still alive somewhere? Abby shook her head slowly. Their physical civilization ended 65 million years ago. The crystals are what remains, a living legacy, waiting for new stewards? She opened her eyes, which now shimmered with the same purple light that filled the chamber. They chose us, not just Blackwoods, but humanity. We're ready now, or will be soon. Ready for what? Sophia asked. To receive their knowledge, to learn from their mistakes and triumphs. They reached a technological singularity point and nearly destroyed themselves before developing the wisdom to use it properly. Abby's expression was one of profound understanding. They don't want us to repeat their path. The chamber's luminescence began to pulse rhythmically, the pattern spreading outward from the interface chair in concentric waves. Outside, unseen by those in the chamber, similar pulses emanated from the mountain itself, visible as subtle aurora-like displays in the night sky. It's starting, Hayes whispered. After all these years, within the crystalline network spanning the 60 miles between the two deposits, something awakened fully. A consciousness distributed across millions of individual crystals, dormant for eons but never truly sleeping. Information began to flow, not just from the crystals to Abby, but between the deposits themselves, like separate parts of a brain re-establishing long-dormant neural pathways. Abby became the conduit, the human interface for a knowledge transmission unlike anything Earth had experienced. Through her genetic connection, carefully cultivated across generations of Blackwoods, the ancient civilization began to share its accumulated wisdom, not overwhelming her mind, but gradually integrating with her understanding at a pace she could process. They're showing me their world, she said softly, their home star, their cities, the cataclysm that forced them to this solution. Her expression shifted between wonder and sorrow. They were so much like us, capable of tremendous creation and destruction. They learned balance too late to save themselves, but in time to preserve what mattered most. Sophia approached cautiously, drawn by some instinct to place her hand on her aunt's shoulder. The moment she made contact, the connection expanded, to include her, a second Blackwood interface, doubling the transmission capacity. Oh, Sophia breathed, her eyes widening. I can see it too. For hours, the transmission continued, witnessed by Hayes and his team with a mixture of scientific fascination and spiritual awe. The purple luminescence spread throughout the chamber, then beyond, visible as a subtle glow from the mountainside to observers miles away. When the first phase finally completed, Abby and Sophia emerged from the deep connection, altered but unharmed, expanded, rather than diminished by the experience. The crystal formations gently retreated, releasing Abby from the interface chair. What happens now? Hayes asked, his lifetime of research culminating in this moment. Abby smiled, a new certainty evident in her expression. Now we begin to understand the gift we've been given and the responsibility that comes with it. The knowledge must be shared carefully, ethically, at a pace humanity can integrate without destroying itself. A new Blackwood initiative, Sophia suggested, not just protecting the crystals from the world, but preparing the world for what they offer. As dawn broke over Medicine Mountain, Abby stood with Sophia at the observatory's viewpoint, watching the sun illuminate the wilderness their family had protected for generations. The crystals in their possession had transformed, no longer simply glowing, but containing intricate internal patterns visible only to those who knew how to perceive them. Harrison knew, Abby said softly. Not everything, but enough to understand what was at stake. He protected the crystals and our family when either could have been exploited. Dad did the same, Ethan too, and now it's our turn, Sophia finished. But different, not just keeping secrets, but revealing truths at the right time, in the right way. Below them, Hayes and his team were already coordinating with Dr. Chen and the researchers at the primary site, establishing new protocols for what would be the most significant scientific undertaking in human history, the careful integration of an ancient civilization's knowledge with Earth's developing global culture. The crystal in Abby's hand pulsed once, warmly, like a heartbeat, or perhaps a greeting across time and space, from those who had planned so carefully and waited so patiently for this moment. The Blackwood legacy had never been about hidden gold or earthly fortune, but something far more precious, the chance for humanity to learn from another world's journey before charting its own path among the stars. As if acknowledging this understanding, both crystals glowed in perfect harmony, no longer alien artifacts, but bridges between worlds, between past and future, between what humanity was and what it might yet become. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.